The frozen winds of Cathara Prime howled across the crystalline landscape, carrying with them the scent of approaching storms and something else that made Vexk's hackles rise. The massive Skarathi pack leader stood 8 feet tall on his powerful hind legs, his silver-streaked fur rippling in the bitter cold as his enhanced senses picked apart every molecule of information the wind brought him. Something was wrong at the ancient denning grounds. Vexk's pack of 12 seasoned hunters moved like shadows behind him, their clawed feet finding silent purchase on the treacherous ice formations that jutted from the mountainside like frozen lightning. Each Skarathi was an apex predator in their own right, evolved over millennia to hunt in coordinated groups across the most hostile environments their homeworld could produce. Their elongated snouts held rows of serrated teeth. Their powerful limbs could shatter stone, and their intelligence rivaled that of most spacefaring species in the galaxy. But today, Vexka felt a familiar knot of anxiety in his chest that had nothing to do with the hunt. The emergency beacon had come from the old caves 3 solar cycles ago, an automated distress signal from one of their remote nursery sites, where the youngest pups were kept safe during the harshest season. The message had been garbled, corrupted by atmospheric interference. But the core data was clear. Intruder detected, protective protocols engaged, assistance required. Vexk had led pack raids against the crystalline spider colonies of the deep caverns. He had commanded hunting parties that brought down the massive ice behemoths that roamed the polar caps. He had personally torn apart automated defense systems left by long-dead civilizations, but nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for the protective fury that surged through him at the thought of some unknown threat near the pups. The ancient caves appeared ahead, carved into the face of a cliff that rose like a monolithic tooth from the glacier below. The entrance was barely visible, a narrow crack in the stone that had been widened over generations by careful Skarathi engineering. The defensive systems should have been active, but Vexka could see from several hundred meters away that the energy barriers were down and the automated sentries were offline. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Thek-Ra, dropped to all fours beside him and tested the air with deliberate sniffs. The fur along her spine was standing on end, and her golden eyes held the same concerned intensity that Vexka felt. "The scent markers are confused," she reported in their growling native tongue, her words forming visible puffs of vapor in the frigid air. "I detect our young, alive and healthy. But there is something else. Something that should not be here." Vexka's massive hands tightened around the grip of his pulse rifle, a weapon designed for Skarathi physiology and capable of punching through military-grade armor. The rest of his pack had spread into a hunting formation, their own weapons ready but not yet aimed. These were experienced soldiers who had fought alongside him through countless conflicts, and they trusted his judgment implicitly. "Analysis," Vexka commanded. Thek-Ra's nostrils flared as she processed the chemical information carried on the wind. Unknown biological signature. Warm-blooded, carbon-based, definitely sentient. The scent signature suggests an omnivorous species with recent protein consumption. Size estimate places the intruder at roughly 2/3 our mass. The pack leader felt his predatory instincts sharpening to a razor edge. An unknown species near their most vulnerable young was a threat that demanded immediate and overwhelming response. The Skarathi had not become one of the most feared races in the galactic community by showing mercy to potential threats, but as they approached the cave entrance, Vexka detected something that made him pause. The scent of his own kind was everywhere, but it carried undertones of contentment rather than distress. The chemical signatures his people produced when afraid or injured were completely absent. In fact, the entire area smelled of comfort, safety, protection. The cave mouth was large enough for 2 Skarathi to pass side by side, but it narrowed quickly into a tunnel that led deep into the mountain. Emergency lighting strips along the walls flickered weakly, damaged but still functional. Vexka motioned for his pack to follow in single file, their weapons ready but held low. The tunnels had been carved by his ancestors generations ago, following natural cave systems that led to a series of large chambers perfect for raising young during the brutal winter months. The walls were smooth stone, polished by countless passing bodies, and decorated with carved symbols that told the story of great hunts and legendary pack leaders. As they moved deeper, Vexka became increasingly puzzled by what his senses were telling him. The pups were definitely alive and healthy somewhere ahead, but their scent was mixed with that of the unknown intruder in a way that suggested close proximity rather than confrontation. More concerning still, he could detect the chemical signature of milk, which meant the youngest pups were being fed recently. The tunnel opened into the first of the main chambers, and Vex-Ka immediately understood why the defensive systems had been disabled. The automated barriers would have trapped the pups inside during an emergency lockdown. But someone had manually overridden the systems to prevent that from happening. Whoever the intruder was, they understood enough about Skarathi technology to manipulate their security protocols. The pack leader raised his hand to signal a halt. Ahead, the tunnel curved toward the main nursery chamber, and he could hear something that made his breath catch in his throat. The soft, chittering calls of very young pups, the kind of vocalizations they made when content and well-fed. But mixed with those familiar sounds was something else entirely. A low, melodic noise that he had never heard before. Humming. An alien was humming to Skarathi pups. Vex-Ka had to consciously control his breathing as he processed this information. His species had first contact protocols for dealing with unknown intelligent life. But none of those protocols covered finding an alien in their most sacred nursery spaces. The very idea was so unprecedented that his military training offered no clear guidance. He motioned for Thek-Ra to take point while he considered their options. She crept forward with the fluid grace that made Skarathi such effective hunters. Her pulse rifle trained on the bend in the tunnel ahead. Behind them, the rest of the pack waited in disciplined silence, ready to respond to whatever threat they might face. But as Thek-Ra reached the corner and peered around it into the main chamber, her body language changed completely. Her weapon lowered slightly, and the aggressive tension in her posture was replaced by something that Vex-Ka had never seen in her before. Confusion, mixed with what appeared to be wonder. She turned back to him with her eyes wide, making hand signals that conveyed a situation so unexpected that she seemed unable to trust her own senses. Vex-Ka moved up beside her and carefully looked around the corner into the nursery chamber. The main chamber was a natural cavern roughly 30 meters across, with a high ceiling that disappeared into shadows above the range of the emergency lighting. The floor was covered with the soft bedding materials that Skarathi used for their young. Specially treated animal hides, thermal regulation mats, and dozens of the small sleeping alcoves where individual pups could rest in safety. 7 Skarathi pups were visible in the chamber, ranging in age from barely weaned to old enough to walk steadily on their own. They were all healthy, alert, and showing no signs of distress. In fact, they appeared to be more content and well cared for than Vex-Ka had expected to find them. But it was the figure in the center of the chamber that made the pack leader's mind reel with disbelief. A human sat cross-legged on the stone floor, holding the youngest pup carefully in his arms, while 3 others curled against his sides. The man was smaller than any adult Skarathi, with the pale pink skin and sparse body hair typical of his species. He was dressed in what appeared to be a damaged environmental suit, patched with improvised repairs, and clearly designed for extended survival in hostile conditions. The human was humming softly, a simple melody that seemed to have a calming effect on the pups nestled around him. As Vex-Ka watched in stunned silence, one of the older pups approached the man and butted its head against his free hand, clearly seeking attention. The human responded by gently scratching behind the pup's ears, exactly where young Skarathi liked to be touched. How could an alien know that? The human looked up suddenly, as if sensing they were being watched. His eyes met Vex-Ka's across the chamber, and the pack leader saw no fear there, only a quiet determination, and something that looked almost like relief. "Thank goodness," the human said in heavily accented but understandable Galactic standard. "I was beginning to worry that no one would come for them." Vex-Ka stepped fully into the chamber, his weapon still ready but not directly aimed at the intruder. His pack followed, spreading out to cover the exits but maintaining enough distance to avoid spooking the pups. The young Skarathi looked up at the arrival of their own kind with obvious joy, but none of them moved away from the human who had apparently been caring for them. "Who are you?" Vex-Ka demanded, his voice a low growl that carried clearly across the chamber. "Why are you in our sacred spaces?" The human carefully shifted the youngest pup to a more secure position before responding. "My name is Marcus Chen, engineer with the Terra Colonial Survey. My ship went down in the storm 3 days ago. I found this place while looking for shelter, and he gestured around the chamber at the pups. They needed help. You are a human, Thekra stated, moving to Vexka's left flank, but keeping her weapon lowered. Your species has no established contact with ours. You should not be on this world. Marcus nodded acknowledgement of the point, but his attention remained primarily focused on the pups around him. You're right. We shouldn't be here. This is supposed to be a restricted system, but we got caught in a solar storm that knocked out our navigation, and when we tried to make emergency repairs, we lost main power during atmospheric entry. The pack leader studied the human with growing confusion. The man showed no signs of aggression or deception, and the pups clearly trusted him completely. More importantly, all 7 youngsters appeared to be in perfect health, despite being apparently abandoned for several days. Explain how you came to be caring for our young, Vexka commanded. Marcus looked down at the pup in his arms. A tiny creature no larger than a human infant but already showing the distinctive markings that would identify its clan when fully grown. When I found this place, the automated systems were offline and the temperature was dropping fast. These little ones were cold and hungry, and some of them were crying. He paused, and Vexka saw something complicated cross the human's face. I couldn't just leave them. The simplicity of the statement hit Vexka like a physical blow. This alien had risked his own survival to care for young that were not even his own species. The concept was so foreign to everything the pack leader understood about interspecies relations that he found himself struggling to process it. You fed them, Thekra observed, her enhanced senses detecting the traces of processed nutrients that indicated recent feeding. I found your emergency supplies, Marcus confirmed. The storage systems were still working, even though the main power was down. It took me a while to figure out how to prepare the formula correctly, but the dispensers had pretty clear instructions once I got the interface working. Vexka took a step closer, noting how the pups remained calm in the presence of their own kind, while still maintaining contact with the human who had been caring for them. The oldest pup, a female who would have been just old enough to recognize pack hierarchy, was actually positioned protectively between Marcus and the approaching adults. You restored the defensive systems, Vexka stated, having noticed the reactivated sensors and barriers as they approached the chamber. Only partially, Marcus admitted. I'm an engineer, but your technology is pretty advanced. I managed to get life support back online and restore some of the environmental controls. But I couldn't figure out how to send a proper distress signal. The best I could do was activate some kind of emergency beacon. The pack leader exchanged glances with Thekra. The emergency beacon that had brought them here had indeed been activated by someone with limited understanding of their systems. But the fact that this human had managed to restore life support to a Skarathi facility, even partially, suggested a level of technical competence that was impressive. Why? Vexka asked, the question emerging from some deep part of his mind that was still trying to understand the alien's motivations. Why risk yourself for our young? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, gently stroking the head of the pup in his arms. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried clearly across the chamber. Because they needed help, and I was the only one here to give it. Where I come from, protecting children is it's what you do. It doesn't matter whose children they are. The words hung in the air between them, and Vexka felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of this human species. He had encountered dozens of intelligent races during his military career, and while some were allies and others enemies, all of them operated according to the basic principle that loyalty and protection were earned through kinship or mutual benefit. But this human had risked his own life to protect completely alien young, expecting nothing in return and knowing that discovery might mean his death. The pack leader found himself looking at Marcus Chen with something approaching awe. The silence stretched across the chamber as Vexka processed what he had just witnessed. In his 43 years of life, through countless conflicts and first contact scenarios, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans sat surrounded by Skarathi pups who clearly trusted him completely, while speaking about protecting alien children as if it was the most natural thing in the universe. One of the pups, a bold youngster with distinctive black markings around his eyes, padded over to investigate the newcomers. But instead of going directly to his own kind, he stopped halfway between Marcus and Vex-Ka, looking uncertainly between them, as if sensing tension and wanting to mediate. Marcus noticed the pup's hesitation and spoke softly to him in what sounded like an attempt at the Scarathi language. The pronunciation was terrible, but Vex-Ka recognized the words for safe and family. The pup chittered happily and bounded the rest of the way to Vex-Ka, who automatically knelt to receive him. "You taught him to speak our language," Thek-Ra observed, wonder clear in her voice. "He taught me," Marcus corrected with a tired smile. "Kids are great teachers when they want something. Took me about 6 hours to figure out that the crying sound meant hungry. Another 4 to learn the difference between cold and scared." He shifted the youngest pup to his shoulder, supporting her with practiced ease. This little one was the hardest. She wouldn't eat for almost a day. Just kept making this heartbroken sound that nearly killed me. Vex-Ka felt something twist in his chest as he imagined this human struggling to comfort a distressed pup without any understanding of their needs or behavior. "What changed?" "I started singing to her," Marcus said simply. "My daughter used to love it when I sang lullabies during her bedtime routine. I figured maybe all babies like music, regardless of species." He demonstrated by humming the same soft melody Vex-Ka had heard earlier, and the pup in his arms immediately relaxed further against him. The pack leader stood slowly, his mind reeling. "You have offspring of your own?" It wasn't a question, but Marcus nodded anyway. "Sarah just turned 8 last month. She's back on Earth with her mother." His expression grew distant for a moment. "We're divorced, but I was supposed to be back in time for her birthday party. She's probably wondering where her dad is right now." The admission hit Vex-Ka with unexpected force. This human had been separated from his own young while caring for theirs, and yet he spoke of it without resentment or anger. Only quiet sadness and determination to protect the pups who needed him. "Tell me what happened," Vex-Ka said, settling into a sitting position that put him on the same level as the human. His pack remained alert, but relaxed slightly at their leader's body language. From the beginning, Marcus shifted to make room as another pup climbed into his lap. This one, a sturdy female who immediately claimed the warmest spot against his chest. The Terra Colonial Survey has been mapping systems in this sector for the past 2 years. Our mission was supposed to be simple: catalog stellar phenomena, chart safe navigation routes, look for potential hazard markers. Nothing that would interfere with established territorial claims. He paused as the oldest pup returned from investigating Thek-Ra and butted against his free hand again, demanding attention. Marcus obliged by scratching behind her ears while continuing his story. "We knew this system was claimed by an unknown species, but the preliminary scans showed no active settlements or industrial signatures. The plan was to stay at the edge of the system, collect our data, and leave without making contact." His expression darkened. Then the solar storm hit. Vex-Ka had experienced the storms that periodically erupted from Kithara's primary star. They were powerful enough to disrupt even military-grade shielding, and could strand ships for days while their systems reset. "Our navigation computers got fried during the worst of it," Marcus continued. "When we tried to repair them, we discovered that the storm had also damaged our fusion containment system. We had maybe 6 hours before total power failure, and the only option was emergency atmospheric entry." "Your crew?" Thek-Ra asked. Marcus's face went carefully blank. "Captain Morrison managed to get us into a stable descent trajectory before the containment field collapsed completely. The ship broke apart during entry. I was in the engineering section when it separated from the main hull." He was quiet for a moment, absently stroking the fur of the pups around him. "I'm pretty sure I'm the only survivor." The weight of loss in his voice was unmistakable, and Vex-Ka felt an unexpected surge of empathy for this alien who had lost everything and yet still found the strength to care for others. The pack leader had lost many comrades over the years, and he understood the particular kind of grief that came with survival when others did not. "The engineering section had an independent life support system," Marcus continued. "It kept me alive during the crash, but the impact damaged my environmental suit and most of my equipment. When I got out of the wreckage, I was looking at maybe 12 hours of survival time in this cold." He gestured around the chamber. I was following a thermal signature on my damaged scanner, hoping to find geothermal activity, or at least some shelter from the wind. Instead, I found this place. The entrance was sealed, Vexka pointed out. Our emergency protocols would have locked down the facility. Marcus nodded. I could hear them crying from outside. At first, I thought it might be some kind of animal, but the sounds were too complex, too organized. When I managed to override the outer door and got inside, I found them huddled together in the main chamber. The heating system was offline, and they were cold and scared. The human looked down at the youngest pup, who had fallen asleep in his arms despite the presence of unknown adults nearby. I didn't know what they were at first, but I knew they needed help. The rest was just figuring it out as I went along. Explain, Vexka requested. Marcus shifted carefully to avoid disturbing the sleeping pup. First priority was warmth. I got the emergency power restored to the heating systems, which took about 3 hours of crawling through maintenance shafts with a basic toolkit. Once they weren't in immediate danger of hypothermia, I could focus on food. He pointed toward a corner of the chamber where Vexka could see the emergency nutrition dispensers. Your automated systems are incredibly sophisticated, but the interface was obviously designed for your species. Took me another 4 hours to figure out the proper feeding sequences and portion sizes. The pack leader found himself impressed despite his confusion. The nutrition dispensers required knowledge of Scarathi physiology and development stages to operate safely. A mistake could easily harm or kill young pups. How did you learn the correct procedures? Thekra asked. Trial and error, mostly. The dispensers had safety interlocks that prevented obviously dangerous combinations, and the pups themselves were pretty good at letting me know when something was wrong. Marcus smiled slightly. Plus, the basic principles of infant care seem to be fairly universal. Warm, fed, clean, and safe pretty much covers it for most species. The oldest pup had been listening to the conversation with the alert interest that young Scarathi showed when adults discussed important matters. Now she approached Vexka directly and began making soft vocalizations that the pack leader recognized as a report. Vexka listened carefully as the pup described her experiences in the simple language that her age group could manage. The human had found them cold and frightened. He had made the caves warm again. He had fed them when they were hungry and sung to them when they were scared. When the youngest one got sick, he had stayed awake for an entire day and night to care for her until she felt better. But it was her final observation that made Vexka's breath catch. She described Marcus using the word that young Scarathi applied to protective adults who were not their parents. Guardian. What did she say? Marcus asked, clearly recognizing that the pup was communicating something important, but unable to understand the specific words. Vexka looked at the human with something approaching awe. She calls you guardian. It is a word our young use for adults who protect them in the absence of their parents. Marcus's expression grew thoughtful. I suppose that's accurate, though I never thought of it that way. The pack leader studied the human more carefully, noting details he had missed in the shock of first discovery. Marcus's environmental suit showed signs of significant damage and improvised repairs. There were patches made from materials clearly scavenged from the cave's emergency supplies, and his hands showed the calluses and small cuts that came from working with unfamiliar tools under difficult conditions. But more than that, he showed the particular kind of exhaustion that came from caring for young while dealing with personal crisis. Vexka had seen it in pack members who had lost mates but still needed to tend their offspring. It was the bone-deep weariness of someone pushing through their own grief to meet the needs of those who depended on them. You have been alone here for 3 days, Vexka observed. With no contact with your own kind, and no certainty that rescue would come. Yet you remained. Marcus nodded. I couldn't leave them, even if I had somewhere to go, which I don't. He looked around at the pups, most of whom had now settled close to him despite the presence of their own species. They trusted me to keep them safe. The simple statement carried a weight that Vexka found humbling. This human had given his word to alien children, and had been prepared to honor that commitment even unto death. It was a level of integrity that the pack leader had rarely encountered, even among his own people. The youngest one was sick, Thekra said, picking up on what the pup had reported. What was wrong with her? Marcus's expression grew concerned. Some kind of digestive issue, I think. She couldn't keep food down and was running a fever. I don't know enough about your physiology to diagnose properly, but she was clearly in distress. He gestured toward a corner of the chamber where Vexka could see improvised medical supplies arranged with obvious care. I did what I could with your emergency medical kit and basic first aid principles. Kept her hydrated, monitored her temperature, made sure she didn't get dehydrated. She started improving yesterday morning. The pack leader moved over to examine the medical area, noting the careful organization and the detailed log that Marcus had apparently kept of the pup's condition and treatment. The human had documented temperature readings, food intake, sleep patterns, and behavioral observations with the thoroughness of a trained medic. You have medical training, Vexka concluded. Basic first aid and emergency response, Marcus confirmed. All survey crew members are required to have medical certification, but I'm not a doctor, and I definitely don't know anything about treating aliens. He looked down at the youngest pup, still sleeping peacefully in his arms. I was terrified that I'd make her worse. The honesty of the admission struck Vexka powerfully. This human had been afraid but had acted anyway, driven by concern for a creature he barely understood. It was exactly the kind of courage that the pack leader valued most in his own people. One of the middle-sized pups had been exploring the edges of the chamber but now returned with something in her mouth, a small piece of metal that Vexka recognized as part of a human tool. The pup brought it directly to Marcus and dropped it in his lap with obvious pride. She's been collecting things for me, Marcus explained with a tired smile. Shiny objects mostly, but occasionally something actually useful. I think she's trying to help with repairs. The behavior was exactly what young Skarathi did when they wanted to contribute to pack activities but weren't yet old enough for real responsibilities. The fact that this pup was extending that natural behavior to an alien guardian spoke volumes about how completely she had accepted him. Marcus Chen, Vexka said formally, using the human's full name as a sign of respect. You have protected our most precious treasures, and asked for nothing in return. This is not behavior we expected from an unknown species. Marcus met his gaze steadily. It's not about species. It's about doing what's right when someone needs help. The pack leader felt the last of his suspicion dissolve completely. Whatever humans were, whatever their species might become in the galaxy's future, this individual represented something that Vexka could respect and trust absolutely. The transformation in the chamber's atmosphere was remarkable. Where there had been tension and uncertainty just hours before, now there was something approaching family harmony. Vexka's pack had settled into protective positions around the chamber's perimeter, but their weapons were secured, and their body language spoke of guardianship rather than threat. Marcus remained at the center of the space, still surrounded by pups who seemed reluctant to leave his side even with their own kind present. The pack leader understood their attachment. In the absence of parents, the pups had bonded with their protector, and that bond would not easily be broken simply because other adults had arrived. Thekra approached carefully, moving slowly to avoid startling the youngest pups. Pack leader, we should begin preparations for transport back to the main settlement. The weather monitoring station shows another storm system approaching within the next solar cycle. Vexka nodded, but his attention remained focused on the human who had created such an unprecedented situation. Marcus Chen, you spoke of having no place to go. What did you intend to do when your life support finally failed? Marcus was quiet for a moment, gently stroking the head of the pup in his lap. I was hoping that someone would come for them before that happened. If not, he shrugged with forced casualness, I guess I would have made sure they were as comfortable as possible and hoped for the best. The matter-of-fact way he spoke about his own death while prioritizing the welfare of alien children hit Vexka like a physical blow. This human had been prepared to die alone among strangers, asking only that his sacrifice might give the pups a better chance of survival. That is unacceptable, the pack leader declared, his voice carrying the absolute authority of command decision. You will return with us to the main settlement. Understood. Marcus looked up in surprise. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure that's a good idea. First contact between our species should probably be handled through proper diplomatic channels. Not because you found me camping out in your nursery. One of the older pups chittered insistently and butted against Marcus's arm, clearly disagreeing with any suggestion that he might leave. The human absently scratched behind her ears while continuing to speak. Besides, I don't know if your people will be as understanding about this situation as you are. From their perspective, I'm an alien intruder who infiltrated one of their most secure locations. Vex Ka considered the human's words carefully. Marcus was right that the situation would require delicate handling. The Skarathi High Council was not known for their tolerance of protocol violations, even under extraordinary circumstances. But the pack leader had seen something in this human that transcended normal diplomatic considerations. You underestimate the weight of what you have done, Vex Ka said finally. Among our people, there is no higher honor than the protection of young. You have not merely cared for these pups, you have proven yourself worthy of the title guardian. That carries obligations on both sides. Marcus frowned slightly. What kind of obligations? Thekra stepped forward, her expression serious. A guardian bond, once established, cannot be easily broken. The pups have accepted you as protector, and that acceptance creates responsibilities that our law recognizes regardless of species. The pack leader saw understanding begin to dawn in Marcus's eyes. In practical terms, it means that you have legal standing within our society as these pups' advocate and protector. The High Council must acknowledge that status, even if they disapprove of the circumstances that created it. One of his pack members, a communications specialist named Zek 2, approached with a portable transmission unit. Pack leader, I have established contact with the main settlement. High Command is requesting immediate status report. Vex Ka took the communicator, his mind already working through the political complexities of the situation. The High Command would want clear answers about the human presence on Cathara Prime, and those answers would need to be delivered in a way that emphasized Marcus's heroic actions, rather than the security breach his presence represented. This is Pack Leader Vex Ka reporting from the Northern Nursery site. Emergency resolved. All pups are alive and healthy, no casualties. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Situation complicated by presence of shipwrecked alien who provided emergency care for the young. Requesting immediate conference with High Command and Council of Elders. The response came back almost immediately, the voice of High Commander Shekva carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Pack Leader, confirm previous transmission. Did you report alien presence at nursery site? Confirmed, High Commander. Human survivor of spacecraft accident has been protecting 7 pups for 3 days. Situation requires senior leadership consultation. There was a longer pause before the High Commander's response. Pack Leader, you will escort all survivors to main settlement immediately. Full security protocols in effect. Council of Elders will convene emergency session upon your arrival. The transmission ended, and Vex Ka handed the communicator back to his subordinate. The formal language of the orders was ominous, but not unexpected. The council would need to debate the unprecedented situation thoroughly before deciding how to proceed. Marcus had been listening to the exchange with obvious concern. That didn't sound particularly welcoming. The High Commander is a cautious leader, Vex Ka explained. She must consider the security implications of your presence here. But the Council of Elders includes those who remember our oldest traditions. They will understand the significance of what has occurred. The pack leader began issuing orders for the journey back to the main settlement. The pups would need to be transported safely, and Marcus would require additional environmental protection for the trip across the frozen landscape. But as his people began their preparations, Vex Ka noticed that the pups were becoming increasingly distressed at the prospect of separation from their guardian. The youngest one, who had been sleeping peacefully in Marcus's arms, began making soft whimpering sounds when Thekra attempted to take her. The oldest pup positioned herself protectively between Marcus and the other adults, her body language unmistakably defiant. They don't want to be separated from you, Vex Ka observed. Marcus looked down at the pups clustering around him with obvious conflict in his expression. I don't want to leave them either. But I don't want to cause problems for your people. Maybe it would be better if I stayed here while you take them somewhere safe. The suggestion provoked immediate and vocal protests from all 7 pups, who seemed to understand enough of the conversation to recognize the threat of separation. Their distress calls echoed off the chamber walls, creating a chorus of heartbreak that made even the most disciplined pack members wince. "That is not acceptable to them," Thekra said with what might have been amusement. "And it would not be acceptable to us. You have bonded with these young ones. To separate you now would cause them psychological harm." Vexka made his decision. "You will travel with us. And you will remain with the pups until the council determines the appropriate course of action. As their recognized guardian, you have both the right and the responsibility to advocate for their welfare." The journey to the main settlement took most of the day, traveling across terrain that would have been treacherous for an unprepared human. Marcus rode in one of the pack's enclosed transport vehicles, designed for moving young or injured Scarathi across hostile environments. The pups traveled with him, refusing all attempts to relocate them to separate compartments. As they approached the settlement, Vex-Ka could see the crowds gathering along their route. Word of the alien guardian had apparently spread quickly through the community, and the Scarathi were turning out in unprecedented numbers to witness the arrival of the first human to set foot on their world. The main settlement was a sprawling complex of interconnected buildings carved into the living rock of a massive mountain, designed to withstand the worst storms their planet could generate. The architecture was both functional and beautiful, with soaring chambers that echoed the natural cave systems their ancestors had preferred. The transport convoy proceeded directly to the council chambers, a vast amphitheater at the heart of the settlement where the most important decisions affecting their people were made. As they disembarked, Vexcon noted the heavy security presence, but also the curious faces of civilians who had gathered to catch a glimpse of the human who had protected their young. Marcus stepped out of the transport vehicle carrying the youngest pup, with the other 6 clustering around his legs like a living honor guard. He looked pale and nervous, clearly understanding the significance of the moment. But his primary attention remained focused on the pups who depended on him. The Council of Elders was already assembled when they entered the main chamber. 12 ancient Scarathi, their fur gone completely silver with age, sat in positions of honor while High Commander Shekva and her staff occupied the tactical consultation area. The chamber could hold thousands, but today it contained only a few hundred carefully selected witnesses. Elder Korva, the most senior member of the council, rose from her position with the slow dignity of great age. Her voice, when she spoke, carried clearly throughout the chamber despite her obvious frailty. Pack Leader Vex Ka, present your report. Vex Ka stepped forward, his own voice formal and precise. Honored Elders, 3 days ago we received emergency signals from the northern nursery site. Upon investigation, we discovered 7 pups under the protection of a human survivor from a crashed spacecraft. This alien, Marcus Chen, had restored facility operations and provided care for our young at significant personal risk. He gestured toward Marcus, who stood quietly surrounded by pups who refused to leave his side. The pups have bonded with their protector and show clear signs of the guardian relationship recognized in our oldest laws. Elder Korva's ancient eyes fixed on Marcus with sharp intelligence. Human, do you understand the significance of what has occurred? Marcus shifted the youngest pup to a more comfortable position before responding. I understand that I've become important to these children, and they've become important to me. Beyond that, I'm trusting your people to explain the cultural implications. The elder's expression might have been approval. You speak simply and honestly. This is good. She addressed the assembled council. We face an unprecedented situation. Our law is clear regarding the guardian bond, regardless of the species involved. But we must also consider the broader implications for our people. High Commander Shek Va stepped forward. Elders, this human's presence represents a significant security breach. We know nothing of his species' intentions or capabilities. We know that one of them risked his life to protect our most vulnerable citizens, Elder Korva replied mildly. This tells us something important about their character. The debate that followed was conducted in the formal language of high diplomacy, but its essence was simple. Should they treat Marcus as an honored guest or a potential threat? The pups seemed to sense the tension, pressing closer to their guardian and making soft distress calls that echoed throughout the chamber. Finally, the oldest pup stepped forward and began to speak in the simple words available to her age group. Her voice was clear and determined as she addressed the assembly directly. Guardian Marcus kept us warm when the caves were cold. He fed us when we were hungry. He stayed awake when little sister was sick. He sang to us when we were scared. He is Pack. The declaration rang through the chamber with devastating simplicity. From the mouth of a child who could barely speak in full sentences came a truth that cut through all political complexity. This human had proven himself through actions, not words, and the young ones he had protected were willing to claim him as family. Elder Corva was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus and the pups who surrounded him. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of final judgment. The council recognizes the guardian bond between Marcus Chen of the human species and the 7 pups under his protection. He will be granted full citizenship rights and responsibilities within our society, with all honors due to one who has protected our young. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. This makes you the first official ambassador between our species, whether you intended it or not. The question now is whether you accept this responsibility. Marcus looked down at the pups who had claimed him as family, then back at the assembled Scarathi leadership. If accepting means I can continue to protect these children and help build understanding between our peoples, then yes. I accept. The chamber erupted in the low harmonic calls that Scarathi used to express approval and celebration. For the first time since the emergency had begun, Vexka allowed himself to feel genuine relief. The human had not only survived first contact but had been formally acknowledged as a member of their society. As the ceremony concluded and the crowds began to disperse, Vexka approached Marcus privately. You understand that this changes everything. You are no longer simply a shipwreck survivor. You are now a bridge between our species. Marcus nodded, still holding the youngest pup who had fallen asleep during the proceedings. I figured that might happen. Though I have to admit, I never expected to become a diplomat by adopting alien children. The galaxy is vast, Vexka replied. Perhaps it needs more diplomats who understand that protecting the innocent transcends species boundaries. As they left the council chambers, Marcus found himself surrounded not just by the pups who had claimed him, but by a growing number of adult Scarathi who wanted to express their gratitude. Word of his actions had spread throughout the settlement, and the response was overwhelming. But it was a message that arrived later that evening that truly drove home the magnitude of what had occurred. The Terran Colonial Survey had received communications from the Scarathi government, informing them that one of their crew members had not only survived but had become the first human to establish formal diplomatic relations with their species. A rescue mission was already en route, but Marcus realized that he no longer thought of it as rescue. He thought of it as the beginning of something new and unprecedented. A relationship between species built not on conquest or trade agreements, but on the simple recognition that protecting children was a universal value that transcended all other differences. The youngest pup stirred in his arms, making the soft, contented sounds that meant she felt safe and protected. Marcus smiled and began humming the lullaby that had become their evening ritual. Knowing that he had found something worth more than survival. He had found a family among the stars, and in protecting them, he had opened a doorway between worlds.